Om Tava Kathamrutam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvigaranti Bhuridajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls.
Is it on?
It's on. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on page 228. We started this last week. This is the chapter The Master with the Brahmo Devotees, part 2. And it's Saturday, June 2nd, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna had been invited to visit the homes of his devotees Balaram, Adhar, and Ram. In Calcutta, devotional music had been arranged by Adhar and Ram. The Master was accompanied in the carriage by Rakal, M, and others. And I don't remember where we are. One of the houses. And the Kathak had been invited. These Kathaks, this is, it looks like Ram's house. The Kathaks usually relate some of the stories from the Puranas or Mahabharata, Ramayana, and they're very dramatic. Yeah? And they'll sing intersperse it with some songs and some quotations and things like that, and everyone enjoys it very much. So now he's talking about a story about the Pandavas. So this is the Kathak. Once the Pandava brothers performed the Rajasuya sacrifice, all the kings placed Yudhishthira on the royal throne and bowed low before him in homage. But Bibhishana, the king of Ceylon, said, "I bow to Narayana and to none else." At these words, the Lord Krishna bowed down to Yudhishthira. Only then did Bibhishana prostrate himself, crown and all, before him. This is actually Sri Ramakrishna speaking. Sorry, he's speaking to the Kathak. Yeah, and he'll be talking about this idea of Nishta, there's one-pointed devotion. Do you know what devotion to one ideal is like? It is like the attitude of a daughter-in-law in the family. She serves all the members of the family, her brothers-in-law, father-in-law, husband, and so forth, bringing them water to wash their feet, fetching their towels, arranging their seats, and the like. But with her husband, she has a special relationship. There are two elements in this ecstatic love, I-ness and Mine-ness. So he's a little different topic. Yeah, Thakur talks about as Nishta very often. It's a very, very important concept. I think of Nishta as the liberal version of fanaticism. The fanaticism is people who are so dedicated to their own ideal that they think that there's nothing else. This Nishta is that same degree of devotion to our own ideal, and yet understanding that everyone else has a right to that same devotion to their ideal, and that's equally valid. Everyone's path is valid. We're all worshiping God through different names and forms and different traditions and everything, but we have some very special devotion to our own spiritual path, and there's nothing wrong with it. Some people may think that, she will only go where Thakur's name is mentioned, and he won't go anyplace else. He only wants to hear about Swamiji, this and that. Very narrow-minded. It's not narrow-minded. This is a very natural thing. If this is the spiritual path that we're on, this is what we want to do. We respect everybody else. From time to time we may go also. We may enjoy other traditions, but we have this special relationship. If, for example, we're going somewhere, maybe on a train, and we see people are reading their books and everything, and we see one person is reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Then we, this is my own person. Huh? We may even go up and ask them, oh, I see what you're reading. Do you go there? You've been initiated, this and that. We feel some special connection. Huh? So this is Nishta. Not that we don't respect everybody else, but we seek out our own family people, that this is our very own. So this idea of belonging to a tradition, this idea of just taking special joy in that particular spiritual path and not swerving from it. We may enjoy reading some other things from time to time. We may get some benefit, of course, and it's good to see other traditions, but come back to our own. This is Nishta, to be established in this one pointed devotion to our own spiritual ideal. It's a very, very nice thing. We only have to avoid the fanaticism, which says everyone else should come to the same ideal. Of course, we're happy if people come. We don't mind that, but we'll never say that their ideal is wrong, there's a lower ideal or anything like that. Everyone is welcome to their own ideal, but we feel comfortable. We feel some joy with our own spiritual tradition, and with others who follow that tradition, we feel a special closeness. So Thakur continues, there are two elements in this ecstatic love, I-ness and Mine-ness. Ahamta and Mamata. Yeah, I always find it very curious that these are the two things that generally we think are great obstacles in spiritual life. Ahamta is ahamkara. And Mamata, so this I and mine, that these are great obstacles in spiritual life, that we should feel that I am not the doer, I am not the enjoyer, that Divine Mother does everything through me, I'm only an instrument, I don't want to take pride or even responsibility or get a claim for anything that I do, and nothing belongs to me, everything belongs to God. But in the path of devotion, we're allowed to have this feeling if we spiritualize it. This is what Thakur means, and a very common theme for the path of devotion. We take things that ordinarily might be obstacles and we spin it around, we give it a twist. We change the intention of it a little bit. So generally we'll say that desire is a bad thing, and yet Thakur says it's the greatest help and passion, that we should be dispassionate, free from passion. But he says, no, we have to have tremendous passion for God realization, tremendous longing for God realization. Bakulata, what is it if not a type of kama? A type of intense desire, but spiritualized and given that direction. So it's the same thing, this sense of I, that yes, I also have a mother. I'm also a child of the divine. I also belong to this tradition. I'm a monk of the Ramakrishna order. I have that pride. It's not arrogance or anything, but pride, we're happy about it. And there's mama, that God belongs to me and I belong to God. There's this feeling of closeness and intimacy. And if we can have the mamata, of course, if we can have it for everyone, that we feel the whole world to be our own, we feel that connection with everyone, then of course it's even a greater thing. So two elements in this ecstatic love, I-ness and Mine-ness. Yashoda used to think, who would look after Gopala if I did not? This is the mother, foster mother, of the baby Gopala, of Krishna, of Sri Krishna. And she had that feeling that he'll be helpless without me. What will he do? That I have to be there. He will fall ill if I do not serve him. She did not look on Krishna as God. The other element is Mine-ness. Yeah, every once in a while she would get a glimpse. With that time he stole the butter. And she wanted to see if the butter was in his mouth, and opened it, and she looked down, she saw the entire universe there. Every once in a while she would be given a little glimpse of his true nature, but then would forget, and she didn't want it. The gopis also, they didn't care for this idea. Krishna dwells within the hearts of all, why are you wandering, longing for him and everything? They told Uddhava, we don't care for that. We want to see our Gopala. We want to see our beloved. She did not look on Krishna as God. The other element is mine-ness. It means to look on God as one's own. My Gopala. Uddhava said to Yashoda, Mother, your Krishna is God himself. He is the Lord of the universe, and not a common human being. Oh, exclaimed Yashoda, I'm not asking you about your Lord of the universe. I want to know how my Gopala fares. Not the Lord of the universe, but my Gopala. So this I-ness. I and mine. How faithful to Krishna the gopis were. That means they had that Nishta. That they didn't care for anything else or anybody else. After many entreaties to the doorkeeper, the gopis entered the royal court in Mathura, where Krishna was seated as king. This is after Sri Krishna, he reached a certain age where he had to take over his duties. He was the prince. He had to leave Vrindavan. He could no longer just be the lazy cowherd boy, just going out and grazing the cattle and playing his flute and all of that. He had his duties, and he had to dress like a prince with a turban and all of that in Mathura. So it wasn't there Govinda, it wasn't there Krishna that they were seeing. The doorkeeper took them to him, but at the sight of King Krishna wearing a royal turban, the gopis bent down their heads and said among themselves, Who is this man with a turban on his head? Should we violate our chaste love for Krishna by talking to him? Where's our beloved Krishna with the yellow robe and the bewitching crest with the peacock feather? Do you observe the single-minded love of the gopis for Krishna? Even, it's the same Krishna, but even their devotion was to that particular form. The particular form of Krishna that they knew in Vrindavan. The ideal of Vrindavan is unique. I am told that the people of Dwaraka worship Krishna, the companion of Arjuna, but reject Radha. This is one of the very interesting elements in the worship of Krishna, that different places with different traditions worship him at different stages of his life. So the Vrindavan period, you'll find both this Vatsalya Bhava, worshipping him as the infant, the Gopala, and then also as the young boy, Govinda, who's the beloved of the gopis and the gopas. So we'll have the Sakhya Bhava and we'll have the Madhura Bhava. But then as we travel out of the Bengal and Vrindavan area, see the Vaishnava tradition, at least according to the Chaitanya, followers of Chaitanya, it moved in two directions. The home was in Bengal, but Chaitanya Deva spent most of his time in Puri, and with the Jagannath temple, and he sent the Goswamis to Vrindavan. So they're the two great centers there. But you go a little further west, and the tradition changes a little bit. That Thakur is talking about Krishna as the companion of Arjuna, but we also find as the consort of Rukmini, especially Dwaraka, because he was supposed to have moved there. I don't know all of the details of this. Somehow after Mathura, towards the end of his life, he went to Dwaraka. Anybody know why? The stories about that? Anyhow, and then he got shot being mistaken for a deer, got shot in the foot or something and died. Anyhow. So he's worshipped there, and no mention of Radha, Krishna, anything like that. Or the baby, it's a whole different story. Almost as if they're two different people, or three different people. The way Krishna is worshipped, the different stages of his life and the different traditions. I don't think we find much of this in the Bhagavata. There'll be other scriptures and things, but in any event.
Ramakrishna temple.
Yeah.
They are common all over India, right?
They're common all over India. I would think so. Yeah. I know nowadays all these South Indian temples will even have it, but I don't know if that's a concession to, this all India concept or. Kumar. In the south, do you see these Radha Krishna temples? Could be. Could be. The Vaishnava tradition is a little bit different, but it's very, very strong. Of course, the Madhva tradition will be more this Vrindavan idea. With the young, I think it's just in Gujarat, western parts, where the Rukmini is more important. And the other point is that Nishta will even apply to different periods in the life of Krishna. So much devotion to the boy Krishna, or the baby Krishna, that when they see him in a different form, then it's almost as if someone else. Thakur very often gives the story of when Hanuman went to Dwaraka. And Sri Krishna said to Rukmini, you better take the form of Sita, I'll take the form of Rama. That Hanuman, he knows that we're the same, but he doesn't care to see us. He wants to see his beloved Rama and Sita. Hey devotee, which is the better, ecstatic love or love mixed with knowledge? What is it? Prema Bhakti?
Yeah.
Prema Bhakti and Jnanamishra Bhakti. Okay. This Jnanamishra Bhakti, Prema Bhakti. Prema Bhakti, of course, will be a very, very high type. Bhakti can mean ordinary devotion, or Bhakti can mean the very heights of devotion. When we read the Narada Bhakti Sutra, we find that it is this Parama Prema is a definition of Bhakti. Tasmin, with regard to God, the highest type of love of God is called Bhakti. Other times we may feel Bhakti Yoga, this is the path of devotion. It's not the highest type of Prema or Bhava, Mahabhava, anything like that. So when he says this ecstatic love, this is the highest type of devotion, and Jnana-mishra Bhakti will of course have to take a back seat a little bit, because we're talking about the very highest. This Jnana-mishra Bhakti, Thakur, he talks about it in different senses, and sometimes he talks about it so favorably that many people will say that this was what he taught. That this harmony, this mixture of the path of knowledge and the path of devotion, because we get so many teachings about what is the real nature of the self, what is the real nature of Brahman, not in conflict with any of this devotion. And Thakur says, we don't really mix them up, we take this Advaita Vedanta, we keep it in our pocket. We tie it in the corner of our cloth, and knowing this ideal of oneness, we feel a little sense of separation because of this ego sense, and because of that, it enables us to have this highest type of devotion. But it's not a dualistic type of devotion where there's a real separation between ourselves and God. There's always this idea that when the sun of knowledge rises and the block of ice melts, it goes back into the ocean and everything is oneness again. There's always that idea. That beautiful song of Ram Prasad really expresses it, this idea that, yes, tasting sugar is a very nice thing, and becoming sugar is also what ultimately all of us will do. We'll all attain to that oneness in that highest state of realization. But Ram Prasad says, I don't want to become sugar, I want to taste sugar. And Thakur says, I like to keep a little sense of separation, a little feeling of I, in order to enjoy that relationship. So this is that Jnana-mishra Bhakti. Sometimes when they talk about Shuddha Bhakti, Thakur will talk about the Shuddha Bhakti as a very high ideal, but that usually means the type of devotion that doesn't care for, doesn't ask for anything in return. That'll be a Hetuki Bhakti. There's a motiveless devotion. Other times, if people talk about, oh, well, I only want pure devotion, then Thakur will say, unless you know the object of your devotion, then how can you have real devotion? So he never likes people to be too one-sided. Some people say, oh, I don't want to listen to all this argument. He said, no, that you should understand these things a little bit. So Shuddha Bhakti, from that point of view, that it excludes all the other paths. I only want this feeling of devotion. For some, of course, this is a very high attitude. For others, it can be a little bit of fanaticism, and unless we realize the real nature of God is being nameless and formless and able to take all forms, then we can think that my path is the only path. So this is not a good understanding of Shuddha Bhakti. Better to have that feeling that I just want pure devotion. That means I only want to love God. I don't ask for anything in return. That type of Shuddha Bhakti, that pure devotion, is a very, very high thing. Otherwise, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, we practice this. This is why we don't simply read devotional literature. We read Gita, Upanishads, and everything. We want to know what is the real nature of the devotee and the real nature of God, and what is that connection. And when we realize that there is a connection, either absolute oneness, or at the very least, we're a part of God, we're a wave in the ocean of the divine, then that feeling of intimacy becomes even greater. Thakur, he talks about 3 different types of devotees. Those who say that God is up there. They look far away, that God is up there, hears our prayers. And the others to say, no, God dwells within the heart. This, of course, is very high. And then the highest, he says, saying that God has become everything. That will be the highest type of the spiritual attitude. So now he'll talk about the Jnana Mishra Bhakti in this an important sense, that we have to know something. Master, it is not possible to develop ecstatic love of God unless you love Him very deeply and regard Him as your very own. So there's going to be a sense in which we have to be able to establish this relationship. Otherwise, for most of us, if our concept of God is just something very vague, then how do we form a relationship? I remember when I was young that we always used to hear God is love. God is love, love God. God is love, love God. I used to think, what does it mean? I don't even know what it means. God is love. What does that mean? Can we identify someone with an emotion? Can we and then how do we love God? God is some amorphous being that it just didn't make sense to me. It didn't make any sense to me because I didn't have any concept. I didn't. We're supposed to imagine God somewhere in heaven on a cloud playing a harp with the angels. Things. None of it made any sense to me. That's why when I came to Vedanta and I heard this thing, yeah, it should make sense. That Swamiji has a very nice statement. He says the highest truth goes beyond reason, but it will never contradict reason. And how Thakur told Swamiji, yes, you don't accept anything unless you understand it. And the yukti, the role of reason, is so important in Vedanta, even though we know the highest truth is beyond it, but we have to go through it. It has to be something reasonable, it has to make sense to us. So this ecstatic love of God, it requires some understanding of the relationship so that we can feel that intimacy, that closeness to God. He doesn't really answer the question here, except he's trying to say that if we want this ecstatic love, then it requires a little bit more. It requires, we won't get it unless we feel some connection, unless we feel that God is our very own. God dwells, at least that God dwells within the heart. Then we start to feel, oh, God dwells within as that light which lightens up my very own mind, as that inner ruler, that inner guide, that inner companion. We start to get some idea. Then we get this concept that of course, if we believe God comes as the avatar, then it's a very tangible thing. Otherwise, we get this concept that this nameless, formless God can be seen as taking a name and a form for the sake of the devotee, so that we can have this loving relationship. All of these concepts enable us to form that relationship and to allow that relationship to grow into a loving relationship. So this is that jnana. Anyhow, Thakur will talk about different elements.
Swamiji,
Yeah.
Prema Bhakti will still maintain that duality, right?
Say that again?
Prema Bhakti
Prema Bhakti.
will still maintain that.
Yeah, now Prema Bhakti, yeah, now this is a very standard thing. Almost all of the highly devotional schools are either dualistic or fall under qualified non-dualism. The bhakti of the non-dualist is a little bit different. A little bit different type of thing. Those who are really strictly non-dualists, they won't be able to have the same type of devotion. Their devotion will be to the truth, or their devotion. I mean, we can be a strict Advaitin and feel that devotion towards these great souls that are born as Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Ramakrishna. We can do that. We can have that type of devotion, but this is what Thakur said to Swamiji, that not in your Vedantic sense, in the sense that, well, everyone is a manifestation of God. Still, I always feel that those who are non-dualists can feel like they're a small wave in the ocean, and that Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, they're gigantic waves. And the little wave will stand in awe of the giant wave and want to bow down before it and worship it and look upon it as the ideal, and can see the power of the entire ocean in that huge wave. And for the non-dualists, this is enough. They don't have to say, oh, God descended from earth, from heaven, and came down to earth and took this form. This is enough. And to enable them to have that type of devotion. Or to feel God dwells within the heart, and then to do this I and mine and this superimposition, and to add these divine qualities, that this infinite absolute Brahman is also the source of the whole universe, dwelling within the heart. Also, we can look upon, we can paint the face on and look upon this infinite absolute Brahman as the Divine Mother, and feel the love that a child feels for its mother. So these are different ways that we can do it. The strict dualist has no problem. I'm here and God is there. And God is the beginning, the end of everything, and I offer all of my worship and prayers and everything to that type of God. It's very easy to practice devotion that way. But if we want to be reasonable, logical people, then we start asking questions. Then very often the dualists will say, stop. I don't want to question these things. That it's written in the scriptures this way. I believe it. I have full faith in it. And don't start telling me that I'm worshiping my own self, this and that. I don't want to hear it. So I'll put my fingers in my ear and I won't listen to all of that. So Thakur presents us with a type of devotion that is based on oneness. See, he's always preaching the path of devotion for this Kali Yuga, and at the same time he says every spiritual path ends in oneness. That's Advaita. Yeah. So it is a Jnana Mishra Bhakti to a certain extent, and it makes our devotion very firm. It puts it on unshakable ground, because we know the truth of it we can experience in our own hearts. This feeling of I exist, I am. And it has nothing to do with the body, the mind, and the senses. It's something transcendent. So we can feel that oneness with the Absolute. The devotee is fine as long as the devotee doesn't have to question anything. The dualists. So, and they have their own ways of arguing, of course. There's nothing wrong with dualism, but Swamiji says that type of devotion leads to fanaticism. I worship God this way because God is this way. Huh? I worship God as Mother because God is Mother. You're worshiping God as Father, you're wrong. God is Mother. It's not Father. Somebody said, no, God is Father, not Mother. See, the non-dualist will never have that attitude. And I shouldn't restrict it to that. Mostly, I think even all these great acharyas, the Madhva, Ramanuja and everything, they'll admit that God can be worshipped in different forms. when it comes to the avatar, though, then there'll be a little, God actually descended and took this form, and this is the easiest way to get God realization. So they'll take it that way. And yeah, let's see this story. Thakur says, listen to a story. Once 3 friends were going through a forest when a tiger suddenly appeared before them. Brothers, one of them exclaimed, "We are lost." Why should you say that?" said the second friend. "Why should we be lost? Come, let us pray to God." The third friend said, "No, why should we trouble God about it? Come, let us climb this tree." This is a very counterintuitive story. You'll see. The friend who said, "We are lost," did not know that there is a God who is our protector. The friend who asked the others to pray to God was a jnani. Now, we would generally say he's the bhakta, he's the devotee. But Thakur says he was aware that God is the creator, preserver, and destroyer of the world. The third friend, who didn't want to trouble God with prayers and suggested climbing the tree, had ecstatic love of God. We would say he's the karma yogi, or that he's the jnani. But Thakur is explaining it in a different way. It is the very nature of such love that it makes a man think himself stronger than his beloved. This is the attitude of Yashoda. This is about Vatsalya Bhava, one of them, of course. And even the Madhur Bhava, that Radha felt that, yes, I should serve him because I know how to serve him best. He needs that type of service and everything.
Also, if you love a person, why would I bother? Let him rest. Why do you bother?
Yeah. So this is a very nice idea that we don't want to pray to God for anything special, that we want to do everything for God and prevent God from having to go to all that extra trouble for us. It's one type of devotion. There are many different types. This doesn't mean that there'll be some people who will say you can pray to God for anything. You remember the conversation between Sri Ramakrishna and Dr. Sharkar, and they were discussing whether Thakur could pray to the mother to cure him, to make him better and everything. And he said, no, I could never ask mother for anything but pure devotion. So Dr. Sharkar says, why? We lie in the lap of mother. We can ask her for anything. And Thakur said, oh, what a wonderful statement. We lie in the lap of mother. So there are people with different attitudes. There are many people who are afraid to pray to Thakur for anything but pure devotion, because he's so strong about it. And there'll be many who say, then pray to Mother. You can ask the Holy Mother anything. These are all the way the mind works. They're really not different, Thakur and Mother, and just different type of attitude. If we feel God to be our very own, we can ask anything. At the same time, Thakur says, you go to the king, you won't beg for a cucumber or a pumpkin or anything. You will ask for the highest. Huh? So different ways of doing things. So the third friend, who didn't want to trouble God with prayers and suggested climbing the tree, had ecstatic love of God. It is the very nature of such love that it makes a man think himself stronger than his beloved. He is always alert, lest his beloved should suffer. So this was Radha. Huh? Thakur talks about these 3 different spiritual attitudes that are represented by the different gopis. That they wanted to be the ones to serve him. So they cared about their happiness more than his, really. They may not have known how to serve him, others could have done it better, but they wanted to do it. Then in the next class, they wanted to get the joy of serving him, but they also wanted him to be happy. Then there was Radha. She didn't care who served him as long as he was served properly. So that was considered the very highest. So he is always alert, lest his beloved should suffer. The one desire of his life is to keep his beloved from even being pricked in the foot by a thorn. Ram served the master and the devotees with delicious sweets. So that's the end of that day. Then we begin chapter 11 with the devotees at Dakshineshwar part 1. It's Monday, June 4th, 1883. About 9 o'clock in the morning, the devotees began to arrive at the temple garden. Now it's a Monday. Why would they all be coming? Anything special?
For any puja? That's what it said.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, generally, the devotees will come on Saturday and Sunday because they'll be working. And if there was anything special to be done, any special questions and things like that, Thakur would ask them to come during the week if they could, so they could meet with him privately. So generally we find that it's on the weekends, or if it's the Durga Puja vacation time, they'll get a couple of weeks off or something at that time, that they'll come. So we'll see. This is a Monday. And the devotees began to arrive, so there must be some special occasion. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on the porch of his room facing the Ganges. M, who had spent the previous night with the Master, sat near him. M, on many occasions, would go and spend time with Sri Ramakrishna. I don't think his wife was very happy about it, and the rest of the family. This is one of the reasons he always tussled with his family members, and was had moved out at one point, and then Thakur convinced him to move back in because he always wanted to be with Sri Ramakrishna. So M, who had spent the previous night with the Master, sat near him. Balaram and several other devotees were present. Rakhal lay on the floor, resting his head on the Master's lap. Very strange thing, huh? Rakhal now is probably 18, 19 years old, and feeling himself to be just like a little boy. Because when Thakur and Rakhal were together, each went into their own mood. This Vatsalya Bhava. Thakur would feel like this Rakhal was just a baby, like the baby Gopala, and Rakhal would also feel that like Thakur was his own mother. His mother had died, and he had a stepmother. But in any event, we find that Thakur went into different moods when different devotees would come, depending upon that relationship. And Thakur, of course, had that vision where he saw Rakhal as a companion of Sri Krishna, and always connected him with that Vrindavan period of Sri Krishna's life. For the past few days, the Master had been regarding Rakhal as the baby Krishna. Seeing Trailokya, this is the Trailokya of the Rani Rashmani's family. He was the son of Mathur and grandson of Rani Rashmani, and he had become proprietor of the temple in 1871. Because Mathur had passed away, he was powerful. And it was his little daughter that was worshipped by Hriday. That was the final straw. Hriday had to leave because he had become so arrogant and felt that Thakur, he can't do anything without me, that Thakur was really afraid of him. We always wonder, I always wondered especially, how Thakur could sit by and not do anything when Hriday insulted Holy Mother so much when she came that time that they all turned around and left and went back to Jarnabhati. And why didn't Thakur say something? But we have to understand how he was really afraid of this Hriday, how he would abuse him, made life miserable for him. He said, as much as he served me, so much did he torture me. So it was inevitable that he would have to leave. But the way that he left was that he worshipped the young daughter of Trailokyanath, which is done sometimes. We have our Kumari Puja and everything. But this is a Brahmin family, and they were, of course, non-Brahmins. They were part of Rani's family, the Kaivarta caste. Considered very, very inauspicious. They were furious, and then they kicked him out. That was the same time when somebody told Thakur that he had to leave, And then Trailokya said, no, go tell him he doesn't have to leave. It's Hridoy. So Thakur said, okay. He wasn't fazed either way. So this is that Trailokya. So Thakur, he was respectful for him, but he was so much younger. He could tell him if something needed to be told. So the master, to Trailokya, was there no jatra performance last night? Okay, so now we know that there was some puja, and during the puja, this was the Palaharani Kali puja, Katyayani. So,
New moon day. New moon night.
New moon night.
So that is the puja.
Okay. Yeah, so generally, especially these nighttime, all of these nighttime worships, very often there'll be a jatra, so people have something to do all night long. For Shivratri especially, and others. But it wasn't done that time. He said, was there no jatra performance last night? There's a footnote. A special worship of the Divine Mother, here it is, had taken place that night in the Kali temple. On similar occasions in previous years, the proprietors of the temple had arranged the performance of the jatra. Jatra is a very simple type of dramatical performance. There'll be some singing and dancing and very exaggerated types of acting and everything, but very enjoyable. Very, very nice. Everyone would love to watch these things. Trailokya, no sir, we couldn't conveniently arrange it. Master, what is done, but please see that this doesn't happen again. The traditions of the temple should be properly observed. Trailokya gave a suitable reply and went on his way. After a while, Ram Chatterjee, the priest of the Vishnu temple, came up to Sri Ramakrishna. Master, well Ram, I told Trailokya that the jatra performance should not be omitted. Was I right in saying that? See, Thakur had this childlike attitude that, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said it. He's a big shot. He's the proprietor of the whole temple and everything. Was it okay that I said that?
Muthul Babu passed away at that.
Yes. Yeah. He passed away shortly before a Holy Mother came. Because Thakur said, oh, if only my Mathur had been here, he could have arranged for, nice place for you to stay and everything else. Ram, what of it, sir? Of course you were right. The tradition should be observed. The master asked Balaram to stay for his midday meal. Before the meal, Sri Ramakrishna described to the devotees the days of his God intoxication. Now, we hear that one should not talk about one's spiritual experiences. This absolutely does not apply to Sri Ramakrishna. Everything we're so grateful. It's such a blessing that he freely told about his spiritual experiences. Otherwise, how do we know what these things are like? How do we have faith that these things are possible? It was absolutely necessary for him to do that. We shouldn't get confused and think, oh, it's okay for us to talk about it if we have any spiritual experiences at all, and if they're genuine at all. They're two different things. And he would warn people that don't start talking about these things, then you'll lose whatever benefit you might have had from them. Sometimes we do it because we want to impress people. Or sometimes we want to share. Sometimes they'll say that if someone is a very dear friend, you're on the same spiritual path, there's no harm if you share a little bit of your spiritual experiences. But some people are so anxious to say that I had this and I saw that and I saw light and everything, that the only benefit they get is that they're able to feel good by telling somebody else. That it kind of just self-dissipates by telling it. If it's something really, really genuine, and the joy is so great that we don't need to add to it by telling it anybody else. We're content just to enjoy that and remember that experience ourselves.
Thakur was extremely simple.
Yeah. And no possibility that he's saying any of this to impress anybody. What he's trying to do is say, look, God can be realized. You can have these experiences. You can talk to God. You can do all of this. How do I know? I did it. Not this egotistical type of I. But this is how we have faith in these things. Where was I? Okay, before the meal, Sri Ramakrishna described to the devotees the days of his God intoxication. Rakal M, Ramlal, and a few others were present. We don't get too much of it here, but throughout the gospel we get it. Master, now and then Hazra comes forward to teach me. See, Holy Mother had her useless brothers that she had to live with and everything. Thakur also had his Hridoy and his Hazra, and even Ramlal, his nephew, he didn't really trouble him the way the others did, but none of them appreciated him for who he really was. Hazra went back and forth. Every once in a while, he'll show great devotion and bow down to Sri Ramakrishna, and he'll say, "What is all this? Half the time you tell me that you know more than I do, and that I'm all attached to these young boys and this and that." So there's a Hazra, and he liked to argue. And our Swamiji was it was very interesting aspect of his personality, that people that other people didn't care to even hang around with at all, he became good friends with. Yeah? So even knowing that there's a Hazra, here he's sitting outside Thakur's room with his beads to impress everybody. Now, most people would think, oh, how arrogant, this and that. But Swamiji didn't have that inside of him. See, this is that whole concept that we see the faults in others if we have those own faults. Swamiji didn't have this whole concept of impressing anybody, so he wasn't offended when he's trying to impress other people. It didn't bother him at all. So they were good friends. They would sit and chat. One of the nice incidents when they were talking about this Ashtavakra Samhita and this idea that Brahman has become all this, Swamiji and Hazra were laughing and saying, what a ridiculous idea. God has become the pot. He's become the chair and the table and everything. They're laughing. And Thakur comes out and says, what are you talking about? They said, oh, it's all the big things. You won't understand these things. Laughing. They're joking. And he said, oh, I see, and everything. And then he touches Narendra, and he goes into this ecstatic mood for several days. He sees everything as Brahman. So anyhow, this is because he and Hazra were talking that came about. So he says, now and then Hazra comes forward to teach me. He says to me, why do you think so much about the youngsters? One day I was going to Balaram's house in a carriage. I felt greatly troubled about it. So this again was that childish nature, that if anybody said anything to Thakur, then he would think, oh, maybe they're right. Huh? This is why so many times when Swamiji would say, oh, these are all hallucinations, these visions, he would go to the Divine Mother and say, are they really hallucinations? Maharaj. So when Hazra would say things to him, sometimes he would wonder about it, and he would ask. So Thakur says, one day I was going to Balaram's house in a carriage. I felt greatly troubled about it. I said to the Divine Mother, Mother, Hazra admonishes me for worrying about Narendra and the other young boys. He asked me why I forget God and think about these youngsters. No sooner did this thought arise in my mind than the Divine Mother revealed to me in a flash that it is she herself who has become man. She manifests herself most clearly through a pure soul. At this vision, I went into samadhi. Afterwards, I felt angry with Hazra. I said to myself, that rascal made me miserable. And then I thought, but why should I blame the poor man? How is he to know? Yeah, some of the worst visions that Thakur had were because people asked him to do things that he didn't want to do. Pray to the Divine Mother for his health, things like that. And he'd have some of these really terrible visions, and I don't even want to go into it. Some of them are very graphic. I know these youngsters to be Narayana himself. At my first meeting with Narendra, I found him completely indifferent to his body. This is very interesting. The one thing that impressed him that time, I mean, there were many things. He could just look at his face and see everything. But he was impressed with the fact that his clothes were a little bit disheveled and weren't spick and span and everything. That it showed that he didn't care too much about his physical appearance, anything like that. In those days, there's Narendra, he didn't care about what people thought about him at all. That's why some people thought that he was very arrogant before they got to know him. Who is this boy? He'll be sitting in the corner singing to himself and everything as if nobody else exists. But when they got to know him, then they understood who he really was. So I found him completely indifferent to his body. When I touched his chest with my hand, he lost consciousness of the outer world. Regaining consciousness, this will be when Swamiji came that first time to Dakshineshwar. He met him earlier one time at Surendra's house. He was asked to sing. He came from the neighborhood and he sang. And then Thakur, he saw the fine young man. He said, come visit me sometime. But it wasn't until he saw him in Dakshineshwar that he really recognized that, and he had that vision, of course, that he was one of the seven sages and lost in samadhi. So, regaining consciousness, Narendra said, oh, what have you done to me? I have my mother and my father at home. The same thing happened at Jadu Malik's house. This was probably the third visit, second or third visit. Anyhow, when Narendra said third, I think, he said, oh, okay, this mad Brahmin is not going to trick me again with his touch and everything, that each time he does, then he puts me in some other state of mind. He said, I'll exert my willpower. I won't allow this to happen this time. So he said, come, let us go. And they went to Jadu Malik's house. Was just at the southern gate of Dakshineshwar temple compound. I've never seen it. I don't know if it's still there. And apparently there's a Nahabat on the northern side and a Nahabat on the southern side where music would be played. I don't know if that's even there anymore. Anyhow, just south of that was Jadu Malik's house. He was a very wealthy man. Thakur went there many times. They had an interesting type of friendship. Jadu Malik was very devoted to him, but not really a spiritual person. Anyhow, he could go there whenever he wanted. And even if there was nobody there, they would let him in. So apparently just he and Narendra were sitting there. And again, he touched him. Now there's Narendra, who had tremendous willpower. Not a single disciple of Sri Ramakrishna had that mental power, willpower that he had. But again, just like that. Lost all outer consciousness. And then Thakur asked him all of these questions. Who are you? Why were you born? What is your mission? How long will you live? All of these questions. And Narendra gave all of the answers, proper answers. All of the things that he knew from his spiritual vision that agreed with what he had seen in that vision earlier. He said everything matched, he said. And so this Narendra, who had such strong willpower, just like that, he went into some type of state. The other ones, he went into some type of ecstatic state, we can say some type of samadhi. But this was a little bit different, almost like in a trance. Almost as if hypnotized. And he could answer questions and everything. And he answered all of those types of questions. The same thing happened at Jadu Malik's house. As the days passed, I longed more and more to see him. My heart yearned for him. Yeah, so many stories of how he would weep for Narendra. And himself would go in search of him. And would ask people, have you seen him? Tell him to come, tell him to come. He had tremendous longing to see him. One day at that time I said to Bholanath, Bholanath was a clerk at the Dakshineshwar temple garden. Oh, these are all the different workers there. Can you tell me why I should feel this way? There's a boy called Narendra of the Kayastha caste. It simply means that he is not a Brahmin who would be shown great respect by everybody. He's an ordinary boy, Kayastha caste. In Bengal, this is also very high. This is it's not like a low caste at all. Next to the Brahmins, the Kayasta is the very highly regarded caste. Why should I feel so restless for him? Bholanath said, you will find the explanation in the Mahabharata. On coming down to the plane of ordinary consciousness, a man established in samadhi enjoys himself in the company of sattvic people. He feels peace of mind at the sight of such men. When I heard this, my mind was set at ease. Now just think, this Sri Ramakrishna, this God-man of the highest possible caliber, is feeling relieved when a simple clerk at the Dakshineshwar temple tells him, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's written in some of the scriptures also that this, and he says, how relieved I feel. So simple. Huh? And not the least bit of pride. Other people would think, who is he to be able to tell me that this is okay or not okay? But he was absolutely free from pride. When I heard this, my mind was set at ease. Now and then I would sit alone and weep for the sight of Narendra. Oh, what a state of mind I passed through when I first had that experience. So that first had that experience would have been at the Kali temple. Now we won't say that this is the absolute first, because we know when he was walking through the field that day, going to the Vishalakshi temple, that I seen the white crane flying with the dark rain clouds in the background, overcome with emotion, fell down unconscious. That we may take as his first type of samadhi or experience. And then the night of Shivratri, when he lost all outer consciousness and remained in that mood for 3 days. But he's talking now, I'm pretty sure, about that real vision at the Kali temple. When he said, Mother, if you don't reveal yourself to me, then I'll cut my throat with a knife. When he reached for the knife hanging on the wall, and then he had that vision. And that was really the most profound and the first of that type. When I first had that experience, I could not perceive the coming and going of day or night. People said I was insane. What else could they say? They made me marry. So this was Thakur's brother, Ram Kumar, and his mother also agreed that if he were made to marry, then he would have to think about earning money and looking after his wife. It would bring his mind down to the ordinary plane. So they all thought it was a good idea, and they all thought that he'll object to it, and we'll have to convince him or force him to do it. But like a little boy very merrily said, oh, okay. And he was watched, oh, you're looking at this place and that place, and said, you can look wherever you want, but you won't find my wife. She's already been marked with a straw. You go to the house of this Ramchandra Mukherjee, and then you'll find the little girl there. That's the one. So he took it all as a jest and as a type of interesting little game. So they made me marry. I was then in a state of God intoxication. At first, I felt worried about my wife. Then I thought she too would eat and drink and live like me. Part of this worry was that she would want to try to drag him down to the world. But he was so relieved that first day when she came to Dakshineshwar to stay with him, and he asked her that, this is the type of life I lead. What is your idea? You're my wife, you have some rights. If you really want me to live a certain type of life, I have to think about it. She said, no, I want you to do exactly as you do, and I'll also live that way. So, of course, they lived like brother and sister throughout her life, or his life. Of course, she lived another 33, 34 years after he passed away. Half of her life was without him. She lived to be 67. We forget sometimes how many nights she had to weep for him. And what a blow it was when he passed away. I visited my father-in-law's house. They arranged a kirtan. It was a great religious festival, and there was much singing of God's holy name. Now and then I would wonder about my future. I would say to the Divine Mother, Mother, I shall take my spiritual experiences to be real if the landlords of the country show me respect. They too came of their own accord and talked with me. Oh, what an ecstatic state it was. Even the slightest suggestion would awaken my spiritual consciousness. I worshipped the beautiful. In a girl 14 years old, I saw that she was the personification of the Divine Mother. At the end of the worship, I bowed before her and offered a rupee at her feet. One day I witnessed a Ram Leela performance. I saw the performers to be the actual Sita, Rama, Lakshmana, Hanuman, and Bibhishana. Then I worshipped the actors and actresses who played those parts. Anyhow, this goes on.
Worship the beautiful.
Yeah, Sundar, huh? Did they say? Or Sundari. What does it say? Shundari. That's the name. I don't know. Is that an actual form of the Divine Mother worshipped anywhere? Maharaj, did you ever hear of that? Shundari, is it the name of a goddess? I don't know what it means exactly. Yeah. What?
I mean, is it in that context, Maharaj? Phalaharini Puja?
It could be that this Phalaharini Puja, this was just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
That we observed it. We didn't, of course, do anything special here, but this was when Thakur worshipped the Holy Mother Shodashi. This is, of all the forms of Mother Kali, this is the most benign. Tripura Sundari, it could be, because with the Sundari is there in that name. So it's possible that this is a similar type of thing. Okay, we'll stop here. He'll go on a little bit about these different spiritual experiences that he had. So we're stopping here on bottom of page 231. Okay. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanukham Bhathur Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamedhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the Divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.